Count backwards from 100, said the dentist. As I slipped into unconsciousness, I saw the hand that held the drill drift from my mouth to my eye. Trapped and starving in a World War I trench, I gave my last ration to my best friend and partner. Adolf seemed so passionate about having a future in politics. It would be wrong to let him die. I love going to the beach and watching the difference between the low and high tides. Although this tide has been very low for quite some time. No one will ever believe you, he said with a shimmering grin as he held the knife. I tried to stop him from taking it from me, but with each bloody thrust into his own chest, I knew the police would never believe it really was a suicide. The school jocks all gathered in a corner and started yelling at me. "Don't, please," they begged as I aimed down my sights. I took one last gulp of air as I continued sinking helplessly into the quicksand. I opened my eyes under the sand just to see hundreds of bodies frozen in place, their eyes blinking frantically at me. My dad left 3 days ago. I hope he comes home soon. I don't think Mommy is supposed to be underwater this long. Do it, I whispered. Man, I love working on the suicide hotline. I finished telling her about my nightmare that involved a tragic car crash. That's strange. I had the same dream last night too, was the last thing she said before a tractor trailer began to swerve into our lane. I never thought my sleepwalking was a problem. That all changed when I woke up in the middle of murdering the family across the street. I'm going through a lot of things right now, I jokingly said aloud to myself as my car continued to crash through the store's interior. I worked at an oil rig in the 70s. One day we drilled very deep down, hoping to find an oil deposit. But instead, we were met with 1 billion screams. They say that every time you learn something, a new wrinkle appears on your brain. After some investigation, I was angry to find out that my students didn't learn anything from my lessons. Did you know that the Center for Disease Control keeps a sample of every disease known to man in an underground vault? Did you know that some of those diseases can only be preserved inside of living, human hosts? My son asked, "Mom, can I play with the kids in the basement?" We had just moved in. My doctor said the first symptom is memory loss. My doctor said the first symptom is memory loss. I must be a good boy. I must be a good boy, the dog kept repeating to himself. After being told so many times not to bark, he remained silent as he watched the serial killer silently sneak in through the window. As they came around the corner, I lunged for the cage doors, screaming and pleading for help. "You have to get me out of here." "I told you this haunted house has the most realistic actors." One of them laughed as they walked away. Today marks 12 years of sobriety for me. As I perched over my next victim, knife in hand, I realized this filled the void much better than alcohol ever did. Someone broke into my house today while my parents were out. I tried shaking the chains as hard as I could to get their attention, but the basement walls were too thick. My wife handcuffed me to the bed, took my pants off, and winked at me, saying she would be right back. It's been an hour now, and all I smell is gas. The terror of sleep paralysis has plagued me for my entire life. Staring up at the crematory ceiling, I wish I'd known it would stay with me in death. My daughter told me about her imaginary friend that lives in the basement. I then realized she found the body. My family protected me from the monsters as I took my last schizophrenia pill. When I opened my eyes, only the monsters remained. What's big, yellow, and can't swim? A school bus full of children. It's okay, darling. The new babysitter is here to put you to bed, my mother said as she hugged me and smiled at the young woman behind her. I'm surprised she couldn't feel me shaking as I looked upon the face that I'd been seeing outside my window for weeks. Look, Mommy, a giant snake! My son ran into the street to examine it, but he began violently convulsing and his body went limp seconds after touching the fallen wire. As she held my hand, she broke down sobbing and apologized to me again and again. That's probably a bad sign coming from a palm reader. I was driving in my car when I heard pounding in my trunk. I realized he wasn't dead. I decided to finally shoot the person that ruined my life. But as I pulled the trigger, everything went dark. I never believed in hell until I heard screams from the well in my backyard. I always kept my family videotapes locked away in the basement. I can't risk giving clues to where my son's body is. I finally woke up with a serious pain in my stomach after being hit in the head. You are awake, she said, as she continued to stitch the baby in me. She held her child warmly, happy she was finally a mother. She stepped over the once large and pregnant body of the woman her husband had been seeing at night, wiping the blood off the knife on her skirt. My best friend said she was a cannibal. I thought she was joking until I saw her eating my sister. The principal of my son's school called me at work today to tell me my son pushed another kid while on a school excursion. I initially thought that this hardly warranted a phone call until I remembered that my son's excursion was to the Grand Canyon. Battery at 1%. I looked at Earth one last time before my suit ran out of power. I put up some pretty solid posts last night, but I woke up this morning and noticed that almost all of them got taken down. I can't help but wonder, if they made it past the fence this easy, who's to say they aren't already inside? I kept reminding the little boy that he was going to meet SpongeBob. He eventually stopped crying and even helped me tie the bricks to his feet. I framed the first letter I got as a police officer from a woman thanking me after I'd supported her through her daughter's suicide. I passed it in my hallway every day for nearly 8 years before realizing the handwriting was the same as on the girl's suicide note. I hum quietly as I rock my 1-week-old, kissing her forehead softly. The doctors are wrong. I just know she'll take her first breath soon. Once there was an ugly barnacle. He was so ugly that everyone died. My wife approached me with a plate and asked, "Have you had enough or do you want more?" I raised my hands in surrender as I spat out blood. But it was a rhetorical question, as yet another dish shattered against my skull. With a smile, I told the genie I wished for happiness. He laughed at me, and with a snap, I felt my heart finally stop beating. A child growing up as an orphan is too terrible to think about. So I approached the sobbing girl, stepping over the bodies of her parents with the hammer raised once more. Gravity is a mere illusion and can be easily ignored if you use your brain enough. Wow, kids are really gullible these days, I thought to myself, watching them lining up at the window, which is on the 9th floor. My grandfather has Alzheimer's. I've been removing one small body part per day, and he doesn't even know he's losing them. Not only are these the most severe sunburns I've ever seen, but she's deficient in vitamin D and protein, explained the doctor as she stood by the little girl's bed in the ER. After she left the room, the girl's father leaned over to his daughter and whispered, "Sweetie, I know you were starving, but this is why we only feed at night. This sub is falling apart. I told them the torpedo protection wasn't that good. It seems you have discovered an entirely new type of termite." I felt the terror rise in my chest as the doctor turned around with the X-rays. This also explains the aching you've been feeling in your bones. Thanks for watching. You can watch another scary animation here. Also, don't forget to subscribe and to hit that notification bell to stay tuned for future videos.